Rain misted down in silver threads, streaking the windows of the black limousine as it cruised through the dark streets of Verona City, a sprawling modern metropolis with a heartbeat that never slowed. Neon lights shimmered across puddles like spilled jewels, and every shadow seemed to watch her. Myra Vance pressed her trembling fingers to her lips, the taste of fear sharp as blood. Tonight had been the longest night of her life, the night she broke free. Behind her, the faint echo of a gunshot still replayed in her head. It had been hours since she ran from that mansion, from the sound of glass shattering and the smell of gunpowder that clung to her silk dress. She thought marrying into the Vital family, the most feared mafia syndicate in Verona, would protect her. That her sharp mind and ambition would give her a place at their table instead of under it. But Myra had been wrong. She was never meant to be a queen in their world. She was meant to be a pawn, useful, disposable. And when she overheard her husband, Dario Vital, giving the order to remove her before dawn, something inside her snapped. Now, as she sat in the back of the limo driven by the only person she trusted, Luca, her cousin and former getaway driver, she knew she had one chance to disappear. One more turn, Luca muttered, his voice low. "You're sure about this, Myra? Marrying a stranger, that's your escape plan?" Myra's reflection in the window was pale but fierce. "Yes. They can't legally touch me if I'm married. And no one will expect me to marry him." Luca gave a humorless laugh. "You mean a man you found sleeping behind a soup kitchen?" Myra's lips curved faintly. "Exactly. It was madness, she knew. But the Mafia kept track of everything: bank accounts, aliases, even the people she spoke to. The only way to vanish completely was to bind herself to someone they'd never look twice at. And she had found him, or rather, he had found her. A man with eyes like smoke and a voice that rumbled low when he spoke her name. A man who looked at her, not like she was a socialite or a criminal's wife, but like he could smell her fear. His name was Kieran Wolf. And if names were omens, his was a warning she hadn't yet understood. The proposal. She met him 3 nights earlier. Myra had slipped into St. Hilary's shelter wearing a hoodie and a cheap wig, pretending to be one of the countless volunteers serving soup. She'd been looking for someone, anyone who didn't belong to her world. That's when she saw him sitting in the corner, apart from everyone else. He was tall, even seated, he had a commanding presence. His coat was torn, but clean. His hair, dark and messy, fell just over his sharp eyes, which glowed amber in the flickering light. There was something ancient in his stillness. When she placed the bowl of soup before him, he looked up, and for a heartbeat, Myra forgot to breathe. He didn't thank her. He just stared. And in that silence, she felt seen. Later that night, she found him again, smoking in the alley behind the shelter. "You followed me," he said, his voice gravel over velvet. "I have a proposition," she replied, lifting her chin. He arched a brow. "Do I look like a man who takes propositions from strangers?" "No," she said. "But you look like a man who could use a reason to stay out of trouble." His laugh was low, dangerous. "You have no idea how wrong you are." Still, he listened. Myra explained everything: her marriage to Dario Vital, the danger she was in, and her plan to vanish by marrying someone off the grid. When she finished, he had simply looked at her for a long moment, smoke curling from his fingers. "What's in it for me?" Myra hesitated, then said, "Money. Enough to start over." He stepped closer, until she could feel the heat radiating from his body despite the cold. "And if I told you I don't care about money? Then what do you want?" she whispered. His eyes gleamed gold in the dark. A name. And a promise that when you find out what I am, you won't run. She didn't understand then, but she would. That night, they made a deal. 3 days later, under the indifferent gaze of a courthouse clerk, Myra Vance became Myra Wolf. The stranger husband. Their marriage was supposed to be temporary, a transaction. A few papers, a signature, and a shared apartment for appearance's sake. But from the moment they stepped into the small, creaky building on the edge of the city, everything changed. Kieran was different. He moved like a man constantly listening to something unseen, his steps too light, his reactions too sharp. At night, she heard him pacing, restless, as though the walls were too tight for him. Once, when she woke at 3 a.m., she found him standing by the window shirtless, the moonlight carving his body into shadows and scars. His reflection in the glass seemed almost wrong, his eyes glowing faintly gold, his breath fogging the glass though the room was warm. She watched in silence until he turned. "Couldn't he sleep?" he asked, his tone softer than she expected. She shook her head. "You keep the window open. It's freezing." "I like the cold," he murmured. "It keeps things quiet." "What things?" He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Dreams." Myra wanted to ask more, but something in his gaze silenced her, something ancient, almost feral. Instead, she said, "I'll make coffee." He followed her to the tiny kitchen. The tension between them wasn't just fear, it was magnetic. Every glance lingered too long, every word hummed with unspoken curiosity. By the time dawn painted the city gold, they had fallen into a strange rhythm, two fugitives from different worlds bound by lies neither fully understood. The first threat. It didn't take long for the Mafia to find her trail. 2 days after the wedding, Myra woke to a message on her burner phone, "We know you're alive. You can't hide behind him." She froze. How did they know about Kieran? Before she could think, Kieran appeared beside her, silent as shadow. He read the message once, his jaw tightening. "They'll come," he said simply. Myra's heart hammered. "You're not afraid?" His eyes lifted to hers, golden, burning, unearthly. "They should be." There was something in his voice that didn't sound human. That night, as thunder rolled over Verona, she saw it for the first time. The truth. The monster in the rain. It happened when the first men came for her. 3 black cars pulled up outside their apartment. Myra saw them from the window, men in suits, armed, moving with the precision of hunters. "Kieran," she began, but he was already moving. "Stay inside," he said, his tone low, almost guttural. "What are you going to do?" He didn't answer. Instead, he stepped out into the storm, barefoot, the rain slicking over his skin like mercury. The moment the first man aimed his gun, Kieran looked up and the world seemed to stop. His eyes blazed gold. His muscles rippled beneath his skin as something primal stirred within him. Then came the sound, a deep, resonant growl that wasn't human. The gunmen hesitated, fear flickering in their eyes. And in the next breath, Kieran Wolf was no longer a man. The transformation was fluid, terrible, beautiful. Bones cracked, tendons shifted, his body stretching into something immense, a creature of darkness and fur and fire-lit eyes. The werewolf inside him had awakened. Myra watched, frozen, as he tore through the men with a savagery that made her heart stutter. It should have terrified her, and it did, but it also drew her, mesmerized her. When it was over, he stood beneath the rain, his chest heaving, blood mixing with water at his feet. Then he looked at her and she saw, beneath the monster, the man who had saved her. Kieran staggered toward her, his form shifting back, the beast receding into his skin. His voice, when he spoke, was rough with exhaustion. "Now you know," he whispered. "Do you still want to run?" Myra shook her head, tears spilling down her cheeks. "No, I think. I just found something worse than the Mafia." He smiled faintly. "You haven't seen the half of it?" It came in soft sheets that whispered against the window of their apartment, a rhythm that filled the silence between them. The police had come and gone, but Myra hadn't told them the truth. "How could she, a wild animal, attack?" she said, her voice calm despite the chaos in her chest. "My husband fought it off." They hadn't questioned her further. Now, she sat on the couch wrapped in Kieran's worn jacket, watching the raindrops chase each other down the glass. Every sound outside made her tense, the screech of tires, the shuffle of footsteps. Kieran hadn't said much since that night. He cleaned up the mess, disposed of the evidence, and disappeared until morning. When he returned, he was soaked, silent, and smelled faintly of smoke and pine. He hadn't looked at her the same way since. It was as if the man who stood in the rain, covered in blood and lightning, was still out there somewhere watching her from behind those burning golden eyes. And yet, she couldn't bring herself to fear him. Not entirely. A quiet morning. The sound of a mug clinking drew her out of thought. Kieran was in the kitchen, moving quietly. He wasn't wearing a shirt again, he rarely did, and the faint scars across his shoulders caught the morning light. He turned when he felt her gaze, his movements precise, almost animal. "You should eat," he said. His voice was low, calm, but there was something restrained in it. She hesitated before replying. "I didn't think werewolves ate breakfast." He gave a short laugh. "We do. Just not always what you'd expect." The corner of her mouth twitched. "That's comforting." He poured coffee into 2 mugs, then crossed the small space to hand her one. His fingers brushed hers, warm, calloused, grounding. Myra's pulse skipped. "Thank you," she murmured, watching the steam rise between them. He studied her face for a long moment before speaking again. "You're not afraid?" She looked up, startled. "Should I be?" His expression was unreadable. "Most people would be. They see what I am, they run." Myra held his gaze. "I've already run once in my life, Kieran. I'm tired of it." Something flickered in his eyes, then surprise, maybe even admiration. He turned away, but not before she caught the faintest smile tugging at his lips. The wound beneath the wolf. Later that afternoon, Myra found him outside on the rooftop, sitting in the rain as if it didn't touch him. "Kieran," she called softly, stepping closer. He didn't move. His gaze was fixed on the horizon where the storm clouds met the city skyline. "You're hurt," she said, noticing the thin band of crimson seeping through his shirt near his ribs. "It's nothing." "Let me see." When he didn't move, she crouched beside him, ignoring the cold water soaking through her clothes. She lifted the hem of his shirt carefully and gasped. A deep gash ran along his side, half healed but still raw. "You should have told me," she whispered. His jaw clenched. "I heal fast. It'll be gone by tomorrow." "That's not the point." She reached for the first aid kit she brought, her fingers steady despite the trembling inside her. Kieran watched her in silence as she cleaned the wound. The rain fell harder, but neither moved. "Myra," he said finally. "Why do you care?" She didn't look up. Because you saved my life. That doesn't make me a hero. No, she said quietly, but it makes you human. At least a little. He huffed out a breath that might be been a laugh or a sigh. When she finished, he caught her wrist gently, his touch firm but careful. You shouldn't get this close to me. Why, she asked, meeting his gaze. His voice dropped to a whisper. Because the wolf doesn't know how to stop wanting. Her breath caught. The air between them seemed to tighten, pulsing with heat and danger. Then he released her hand and stood, walking away before she could answer. The dream. That night, Myra couldn't sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw him, the wolf beneath the man, the storm in his gaze. And yet, in the dream, it wasn't fear that gripped her. It was longing. She dreamed of running through a forest under a silver moon, her bare feet hitting the earth, her heart pounding with something wild and ancient. She wasn't being chased, she was chasing. And when she caught up, Kieran was there, waiting, his eyes glowing like molten gold. He reached for her hand, pulling her close. You're not afraid anymore, he murmured. She shook her head. No. Should I be? Maybe, he whispered, his lips brushing her ear. Because you're more like me than you know. When she woke, her pulse was racing, her skin slick with sweat. The window was open and she could swear she smelled pine and rain. The revelation. 3 days later, the Mafia found them again. It happened in the middle of the night. Myra woke to the sound of footsteps in the hallway, soft, deliberate. Kieran was already on his feet before she could speak, his eyes glowing faintly in the dark. Stay here, he whispered. She didn't. She followed him into the living room, her heart pounding. The front door creaked open and a familiar face stepped inside. Luca, she breathed. Her cousin looked older, harder. You need to come with me, Myra. Kieran's posture shifted, protective. She's not going anywhere. Luca's gaze flicked to him. You think you can stop them all? You don't know who you're dealing with, wolf. I know exactly who's coming, Kieran growled, and they're not the ones I'm worried about. The two men stared each other down, tension crackling like static. Finally, Lucas said, they be put a bounty on you both. But that's not the worst part. They're working with someone, something. A man who calls himself Silas. He's not human either. Kieran went still. The air around him seemed to thicken. Silas, he said softly, almost to himself. You know him? Myra asked. His eyes met hers and she saw, for the first time, real fear in them. I know what he wants, Kieran said. And if he's here, it means he's found you. Me, she whispered. He nodded slowly. Myra, tell me, did anyone ever tell you where you came from? She frowned. What do you mean? My parents died when I was little. He stepped closer, his voice low. Then who told you that story? She blinked. My uncle. Why? But he didn't let her finish. He reached up and brushed a strand of hair behind her ear, his touch both tender and urgent. Myra, he said, Silas isn't after me. He's after you. And if I'm right, he's your blood. Her world tilted. My, what? Kieran's gaze burned like fire. You were never supposed to marry a man like me. You were meant to lead them. The bloodline. The truth unfolded like a nightmare. Silas, the name whispered in Kieran's past, wasn't he just a rival or an enemy? He was an alpha, the last of an ancient bloodline that had once ruled Verona's shadows. And Myra, she was his heir. Her mother had been human, but her father wasn't he. The Vital family had hidden the truth to keep control over her, to use her as leverage against the wolves that haunted the edges of their empire. Now, with Silas resurfacing, he wanted his bloodline back, and he would burn the city to claim it. Kieran's jaw tightened as he paced the room. He'll come for you soon. When he does, you run. Don't look back. Myra stood, her eyes flashing. No, I'm done running. If I'm part of this, I deserve to know what it means. He turned to face her, his expression a mixture of frustration and something softer. You don't know what you're asking for. The wolf inside you, once it wakes, you can't put it back. Then wake it, she said quietly. Because I want to survive this world as prey. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then, slowly, he stepped closer. You have no idea what you're becoming, Myra Wolf. Then show me, she whispered. The storm had finally broken, but the city still smelled of rain and danger. For 3 nights after Kieran's revelation, Myra barely slept. She could feel something stirring inside her, a pulse that wasn't quite her own, a hum that thrummed in her bones whenever the moon rose. Kieran kept his distance. He spent hours outside, pacing the rooftop, his shadow framed by the skyline's dull glow. She knew he was trying to protect her, but his silence was worse than the danger waiting beyond their walls. When she finally confronted him, dawn was creeping over the rooftops. You can't keep shutting me out, she said. He didn't turn. You don't know what you're asking for. Then explain it to me. He faced her slowly. His eyes were dim amber, tired and haunted. Your father's blood isn't dormant anymore. Silas called it awake the moment he came to the city. That means soon, the wolf inside you will answer. Myra crossed her arms, forcing steadiness into her voice. You keep saying wolf as if it's a curse. Maybe it's not. Kieran stepped closer, close enough for her to feel the faint heat of his breath. You think you can control it? The first change isn't gentle, Myra. It tears everything apart, your bones, your mind, your sense of self. And when you come back, you'll never be the same. Then I want to face it alone. Something flickered across his expression, fear, longing, both. That's what I'm afraid of, he murmured. The first sign. That night, the moon rose full and unclouded for the first time in weeks. Its light spilled through their apartment, white and silver, sharp as a blade. Myra couldn't breathe. Her skin burned as though something beneath it wanted out. She stumbled to the mirror and saw her reflection blur, her pupils widening, her irises glinting gold. Her heartbeat thundered in her ears. Kieran burst into the room, his chest bare, his eyes bright. Myra, look at me. Don't fight it, breathe through it. I can't. He caught her before she fell. His hands were firm around her shoulders, anchoring her to the world. Listen to me, he said, his voice steady, deep, grounding. The pain is the door. You have to walk through it. It felt like drowning and burning at once. Her body arched, she gasped, her skin prickling with fevered heat. Then the pain broke into light. The air filled with the sound of her heartbeat, louder, wilder, blending with something not quite human. And then silence. When she opened her eyes, the room was gone. She was standing in a forest that shouldn't exist, the moon high and terrible above her. A howl echoed through the trees. Kieran appeared from the shadows, not the man she'd married, but the wolf she'd seen in the rain, vast and dark and magnificent. She looked down and saw claws where her hands should have been, silver fur glinting with moonlight. It wasn't a nightmare. It was awakening. Moonlight bond. The forest shimmered like a dream, every scent and sound magnified. She could hear Kieran's heartbeat, smell the rain on his fur, feel the weight of the world hum beneath her paws. He circled her slowly, his golden eyes meeting hers. You feel it, his voice came through the bond, not in words but in thought. The pull between us. What is this, she thought back, her voice raw and new inside her head. The mate bond, he answered. It's rare. It means our wolves recognize each other. She felt heat ripple through her, something primal, magnetic. So this is fate, no, he said, stepping close enough for his fur to brush hers. It's choice. Always choice. Then the world blurred again, and she was human once more, kneeling in the cold, trembling but alive. Kieran knelt beside her, sweat slicking his skin, his breath shallow. You did it, he whispered. She met his gaze, tears glinting in her eyes. You were right. I'll never be the same. And I'll never let you face it alone. Their hands found each other's, and for the first time since her escape, Myra felt something stronger than fear, belonging. Fire and betrayal. The next morning, they left the apartment. Luca had vanished, leaving only a note. Silas found me. Don't come for me. Protect her. Kieran's jaw tightened. He's baiting us. Then we don't take the bait, Myra said. We hunt him first. Kieran studied her, and for a moment she saw pride flash in his eyes. You're learning faster than I expected. But Silas was already ahead. By the time they reached the docks, smoke curled from the warehouses, the Vital's hideout in flames. Silas's men were everywhere, and in the chaos Myra saw a familiar face among them, Dario, her ex-husband, alive and smiling cruelly. Knew you'd crawl back eventually, Dario sneered. Didn't he expect your new man to have such sharp teeth? Myra froze. You're working with him. Dario's grin widened. He promised me what you never could, power. And a share of your little curse. Kieran growled low, the sound vibrating through the ground. Get behind me. But Myra stepped forward, her voice steady. No. He's mine. She didn't shift, she didn't need to. The power inside her answered, a wave of energy rolling off her in a shimmering pulse that sent Dario stumbling back. Her eyes blazed gold. You should have left me buried, Dario. He raised his gun, but Kieran was faster. In a blur of motion, the weapon was torn from his hand, the metal twisting like clay. Silas's laughter echoed from the shadows. So it begins. The enemy revealed. He stepped into view, tall, elegant, and wrong. His eyes gleamed the same amber as Kieran's, but colder, sharper, ancient. Hello, daughter, Silas said softly. Myra's breath caught. Don't call me that. Why not? You carry my blood, my strength. Even your wolf knows me. Kieran moved in front of her. You'll never touch her. Silas's smile was almost kind. You can't protect her from what she is. She belongs to our kind. To me. Over my dead body, Kieran snarled. Silas tilted his head. If that's what it takes. The air cracked, power meeting power, and the night erupted into chaos. The storm had passed, but the world still smelled of smoke, rain, and something new, a fragile quiet that seemed borrowed from another life. For the first time in weeks, Myra woke without running. The sheets were tangled around her like vines, the faint glow of sunrise brushing the edge of the window. Beside her, Kieran stood shirtless, silent, his gaze fixed on the city below. He looked like a statue carved from shadow and light. She sat up slowly. "You haven't slept," she said softly. He didn't turn. "I don't sleep much when the moon's full." "It's gone now," she whispered. Kieran exhaled, finally facing her. His amber eyes were tired but alive. "The moon doesn't leave us, Myra. It lingers, even when you can't see it. Like instincts you can't unlearn." Something in her chest tightened. Fear, affection, maybe both. "You mean what's happening to me?" she said. He nodded once. "The first change is always hardest. The blood in you, your father's blood, is awake now. It'll keep calling until you answer it." She wrapped the sheet around her, feeling both exposed and defiant. "So what happens when I do?" His jaw tensed. "You stop being just human." She should have been terrified. Instead, she felt a strange pull, not toward danger, but toward him. "And you'll still look at me the same way?" she asked. Kieran's eyes darkened. "That's the problem," he murmured. "I'll look at you even more." The air thickened between them. 1,000 words hovered in the silence, words neither dared to say. Shadows and small steps. Days blurred into a rhythm that felt almost normal. Kieran fixed the cracks in the apartment walls, cooked simple meals, kept watch from the window. Myra tried to ignore the hum under her skin, that sense that something wild waited just beyond reach. But she also began to trust him in small, quiet ways. When he passed her a cup of coffee, their fingers brushed and lingered just long enough to make her heart stutter. When they talked, he listened, really listened, the way no one in her old world ever had. One night, she found him patching up his arm after training. "You should let me do that," she said, kneeling beside him. He looked up, half smiling. "You know first aid now. I watched you enough times to learn." She dabbed at the wound carefully, the heat of his skin seeping into her fingertips. He didn't flinch, just studied her face with a quiet intensity that made her breath catch. "You're not afraid anymore," he said. "I was never afraid of you," she whispered. His smile faded, replaced by something softer, dangerous in its tenderness. "You should be." But she wasn't. The pull of the moon. That night, she dreamed of the forest. Of running barefoot under silver light, her heartbeat echoing with another S. She could feel the earth move with her and Kieran's presence somewhere close, like a shadow stitched to her soul. When she woke, her skin was hot, glowing faintly in the moonlight streaming through the window. Her pulse was racing, not from fear but from recognition. Kieran appeared in the doorway, already awake, already watching. "It's starting," he said quietly. "What is?" "The bond." She frowned. "The what?" He stepped closer, his gaze steady. "When wolves share blood or fate, their souls remember each other. It's not magic, it's nature. We're drawn to what mirrors us." "And you think that's what this is?" she asked, her voice shaking. Kieran didn't answer. He just touched her wrist, lightly, where her pulse jumped. The contact was electric, a shock and a comfort all at once. "Myra," he said lowly, "you don't have to fight it." "I'm not fighting it," she whispered. "I'm afraid of what happens if I don't." "Then let it happen," he murmured. The world went still, just her, his breath, and the steady rhythm of two heartbeats syncing for the first time. The change. The first tremor hit at midnight. It wasn't pain, not exactly, more like her body remembering something ancient. Heat poured through her veins, her vision sharpened until she could see the dust motes swirling in the moonlight. Kieran was beside her in an instant. "Stay with me. Breathe." Her fingers dug into his arm as her back arched. "It hurts." "I know. Don't fight it. The wolf isn't your enemy." She gasped, clutching him tighter, every nerve alight. The sound of her pulse filled her ears, and for a terrifying second, the world fractured, human and beast overlapping in flashes of color and sound. Then came stillness. She opened her eyes and saw her reflection in the glass, not monstrous, but radiant. Her pupils glowed gold, faint and beautiful. Her breathing slowed. Kieran's hand cupped her cheek, gentle. "You did it," he whispered. "You changed and you stayed you." Tears blurred her vision. "I thought I'd lose myself." "Not while I'm here," he said. Their foreheads met, no words, no fear, just the quiet surrender of two souls that had stopped running. The morning after. When the sun rose, the city was peaceful again. Myra sat on the balcony, wrapped in Kieran's jacket, watching the light crawl across the skyline. Kieran joined her, setting down 2 mugs of coffee. "How do you feel?" "Like the world's louder than it used to be," she said. "I can hear everything." He nodded. "That'll fade. Eventually, you'll learn to tune it out." She smiled faintly. "You make it sound like bad radio." Kieran chuckled, but the sound faded quickly. "There's something you should know. About Silas." Her pulse quickened. "What about him?" "He's not just after you because of your father. He wants what your blood can do, the balance it gives between wolf and human. He's never had that control." Myra frowned. "So he wants me as, what, a weapon? Or a cure?" Kieran said darkly. "He's old, Myra. Centuries old. His wolf has devoured most of his humanity. That's why he wants you to bind himself to you and steal what you are." The words sent a chill through her. "And you?" she asked quietly. "Why did you help me, really?" Kieran's eyes lifted to hers. "Because I saw myself in you, someone fighting to stay human in a world that forgot how." A quiet confession. That evening, they took a walk along the river. The air smelled of salt and iron, and the city lights shimmered on the water. "You could leave," he said after a while. "Start over somewhere Silas can't reach. You don't owe me anything." Myra looked at him, the wind tangling her hair. "You're wrong. I owe you everything. My life, my freedom, my sanity." He shook his head. "You don't owe me. You saved yourself." "But you were there," she said softly. "And that's what matters." They stopped by the railing. The air between them tightened again, full of words they weren't saying. "Kieran," she whispered, "what if this thing between us isn't just the bond? What if it's real?" His gaze softened, his voice rough. "It's real, Myra. That's why it scares me." "Why?" "Because I don't know if I can keep you safe from what's coming." She touched his hand, threading her fingers through his. "Then don't. Just stay with me through it." He didn't answer, not in words. He just pulled her closer until her heartbeat melted into his. The city disappeared. The world narrowed to breath, warmth, and the unspoken promise of something neither of them had believed they could have. The river ran silver under the morning sun. Kieran crouched beside one of the fallen men, scanning the markings on the sleeve of his jacket. They weren't just Silas's thugs, they bore a crescent moon bound by thorns. Myra had seen it before. That symbol was on the envelopes he sent to my father years ago, she said quietly. The ones warning him to stay away from the old estate. Kieran's expression darkened. Then it's begun. He stood, glancing toward the mountains. We can't stay here anymore. They'll come in waves until they find you. Where do we go? There's a safe house. My family used it long ago when the pact was still strong. It's hidden in the northern cliffs. She nodded, clutching her coat tighter. Then let's move. They left before noon, climbing through the forest's upper ridges. Mist clung to the trees, veiling the path like a ghost's breath. Kieran moved ahead, silent as shadow, his senses tuned to every sound. Myra followed, exhaustion etched across her face but determination burning in her eyes. By dusk, they reached an abandoned church carved into the rock. Ivy swallowed the walls, broken stained glass painted the ground with shards of color. Kieran pushed open the door, revealing a narrow stairway spiraling downward into darkness. This is it, Myra whispered. He nodded. The sanctuary? They descended into a wide stone chamber lit by pale candles that somehow still burned. The air smelled of wax and rain. Symbols carved into the walls pulsed faintly when Kieran approached, like they recognized him. He stopped before an old altar. My ancestors made their vows here. Blood for protection. Loyalty for power. Myra touched one of the carvings, a wolf's head circled by stars. The stone was warm under her fingers. It feels alive. It remembers, he said simply. Our kind always does. That night, the storm returned. Lightning crawled across the sky, illuminating the stained glass in fractured bursts of color. Myra sat near the fire, tracing the edge of a locket she'd found in her pocket. Her mother's inside was a faded picture of a woman with Kieran's eyes. She turned to him. Who is she? Kieran's jaw tightened. My mother. Before the curse took her. How did you get this? I gave it to your father, he said. To keep you safe. Myra froze. You knew my father? He nodded slowly. He was part of the Pact's last generation. He tried to end it. But Silas betrayed him before he could. Her throat tightened. You mean Silas killed him? Kieran's silence was answer enough. The fire popped. Rain hammered the stone above them. Myra felt tears sting her eyes, but she swallowed them back. All this time, I thought my father was paranoid. He said people were watching, that the bloodline wasn't ours alone. I thought he was losing his mind. Kieran knelt beside her. He wasn't. He was trying to protect you from what's coming. Their eyes met, and in that silence something passed between them, grief, understanding, and something deeper that neither dared name. The distance that had once separated them now felt paper thin. You've lost as much as I have, she whispered. Maybe more. Kieran's gaze softened. I stopped counting losses long ago. When the thunder quieted, Myra stood and walked to the window. The moon had risen swollen and silver, framed by torn clouds. For the first time, she didn't feel afraid of it. Kieran, she said softly, what happens if we don't stop Silas? He hesitated. Then the bloodlines merge again. The curse resets and we become his creatures. She turned, eyes bright with resolve. Then we stop him. He studied her, the strength in her stance, the fire in her voice. You're not the same woman who married a stranger to escape the Mafia. I guess not. She smiled faintly. That woman didn't he know the man she married could turn into a wolf? And this woman believes he's the only one who can save her. For a heartbeat, everything stilled: the rain, the wind, even the flicker of the fire. Then Kieran stepped closer, slow and uncertain, as if approaching a dream that might vanish if he breathed too loud. Myra. She looked up. Yes. Stay close to me. Whatever happens, don't run. I'm done running. He reached out, hesitated, then brushed his fingers against her cheek. The touch was light, reverent. Her pulse leapt. The world narrowed to the space between them: the scent of pine and smoke, the sound of two heartbeats finding the same rhythm. It wasn't a kiss, not exactly. It was a promise one made in silence, sealed by the quiet press of foreheads and the shiver that passed through both of them. At dawn, Myra woke to find the chamber bathed in blue light. Kieran was gone again, but this time there was no fear in her chest. Only curiosity. She followed the faint echo of his footsteps through a corridor she hadn't noticed before. It led to a small crypt. In the center stood a stone slab covered in runes. Kieran knelt beside it, tracing them with his hand. "These are names," she said softly. He nodded. "The first bloodlines. Yours. Mine." She leaned closer. "What do they say?" He translated quietly. "When the moon binds the broken, the wolf shall guard the flame. But if the flame betrays the wolf, both shall burn." Myra frowned. "What does it mean?" Kieran looked up at her, expression shadowed. "It means one of us will have to make a choice before this ends." That evening, they left the sanctuary. The path wound down the cliffs toward the valley. Below, the lights of the city glimmered faintly: Silas's territory. Myra felt Kieran's tension beside her. "You're afraid?" "Not for me," he said. "For you." She smiled faintly. "Then I'll try not to make that fear worth it." They reached the valley just as twilight bled into night. The air smelled of rain and iron. Somewhere ahead, a bell tolled a signal. Silas knew they were coming. Kieran turned to her. "If we go in, there's no turning back." "There hasn't been for a long time," she replied. For the first time, Kieran's lips curved into a real smile. "Then let us finish this." The old estate loomed like a shadow carved from stone. Torches burned along the walls, the scent of blood and incense filled the air. Silas waited at the gate, draped in black, his eyes cold and familiar, the same shade of gray as Myra's. "My dear niece," he said, voice smooth as glass. "You've brought me what I wanted." Myra stiffened. "You're lying. You killed my father." "Sacrifices must be made for power," Silas said. "And you, child, were always meant to complete his work." Kieran stepped between them, growling low. "Over my dead body." Silas's smile widened. "That can be arranged." He raised his hand, and shadows moved: men with rifles, eyes gleaming unnaturally. The same mark on their sleeves, the crescent of thorns. The first shot rang out. Myra ducked behind a pillar as Kieran lunged forward, moving faster than human sight. A blur of claws and fury. The battle was chaos: lightning flashing, gunfire echoing through the courtyard. Myra grabbed a fallen lantern and hurled it against a wall of curtains. Flames leapt upward. Silas roared, the calm gone from his voice. "Foolish girl. You'll burn us all. Maybe that's what it takes to end your curse." She shouted back. He turned on her then, eyes glowing with an inhuman light. You don't understand, I am the curse. Before he could strike, Kieran was there. The two collided in a blur of fury and moonlight, the air crackling with energy. For a moment, Myra thought Kieran would lose until she remembered the inscription, "The wolf shall guard the flame." She grabbed the locket from her neck and threw it into the fire. The flames turned silver. Kieran let out a roar that shook the ground. His eyes blazed gold, his movements swift and sure. One final blow and Silas fell, the curse unraveling in a shudder of light. The storm outside broke. Rain poured through the shattered roof, dousing the flames. Myra stumbled toward Kieran, her heart hammering. "It's over," she whispered. He caught her as she fell against him, his breath unsteady. "For now." "But the curse." He touched her cheek. "Broken. Because you chose to believe in me." Outside, the first light of dawn rose over the mountains, washing the ruins in gold. Myra leaned against him, weary but alive. For the first time in years, she felt free. "What happens now?" she asked. Kieran smiled faintly. "We start again. No more running." She nodded, resting her head against his shoulder. "Then let us start together." And as the sun climbed higher, burning away the shadows of the past, the wolf and the flame walked into the light, bound not by blood or curse, but by choice. The smoke from the estate had long since drifted into the valley, but Myra could still taste ash when the wind changed. She and Kieran had left the ruins before dawn, following the mountain trail until the path gave way to meadow and silence. The rain had washed everything clean, yet neither of them quite believed the world was safe again. For 3 days they wandered north, sleeping beneath the open sky. Kieran seemed restless, as if some part of him expected Silas's men to rise from the ashes. Myra kept pace beside him, refusing to be left behind. They spoke little, but when they did, their words carried the fragile honesty of people who had seen too much. On the 4th evening they reached the lake. Its surface mirrored the peaks in perfect stillness, broken only by ripples where fish jumped. A half-collapsed boathouse leaned against the shore. Kieran tested the door, found it sound, and nodded. "This will do for a while," he said. Inside, the air smelled of cedar and thyme. He coaxed a fire from a pile of driftwood while Myra unrolled blankets. When the flames caught, their light spilled across the wooden walls, painting them in gold and shadow. For the first time since the battle, Myra felt warmth sink into her bones. She watched Kieran's hands move steady, careful, almost tender, and thought of all the times those same hands had drawn blood to protect her. "Does it ever stop?" she asked quietly. He glanced up. "The noise. The memories." Kieran poked the fire, sending a spray of sparks toward the roof. "They fade. But they never leave." She nodded, accepting the truth in his tone. "Then we learn to live with them." He studied her across the firelight, something like admiration flickering behind his eyes. "You've changed." "So have you." He smiled faintly. "Maybe we're finally becoming who we were supposed to be." The days slipped into a rhythm of stillness. Morning walks through the forest, quiet meals, evenings by the fire. Kieran hunted when he had to, disappearing into the trees with a bow slung over his shoulder. Myra repaired the boathouse, patching the roof, cleaning the old shelves. They moved like two halves of a single breath, close enough to feel the other's presence, careful not to disturb the fragile peace. But the nights were different. When the moon rose, its silver light poured through the cracks in the walls, touching Kieran's skin like a summons. He would stand outside for hours, unmoving, gaze fixed on the water. Sometimes Myra joined him, wrapped in a blanket, her shoulder brushing his arm. Neither spoke, words felt too heavy. One night, as the wind carried the scent of rain, she asked the question that had been waiting since the battle. "You said the curse was broken. Then why do you still feel it?" Kieran's jaw tightened. "Because part of it lives in me. It always has." She turned to face him. "Does that mean you'll change again?" "I don't know." His voice was quiet, almost resigned. "But if I do, it won't be because of the moon. It'll be because of what's inside." Myra reached out, fingers brushing his wrist. "Then we'll fight it together." He looked at her hand on his skin, then into her eyes. "You shouldn't have to carry my darkness. You carried mine when you didn't even know me." For a heartbeat, the space between them seemed to hum. Then Kieran lifted her hand and pressed it lightly against his chest, over the steady beat of his heart. "Then this belongs to you too," he murmured. They spent the following week repairing an old cabin deeper in the woods. Kieran moved with quiet determination, chopping wood, clearing the chimney, building a fence. Myra tended to the garden that had once been wild, coaxing herbs from the soil. Their small world began to take shape, a home carved out of ruin. Sometimes laughter returned, soft, uncertain, but real. Kieran teased her about her uneven fence posts, she mocked his cooking, which was mostly burnt fish. In those moments the weight of prophecy and bloodline seemed far away. Yet every night, the wolf stirred. Not in violence, but in longing, a restless energy beneath Kieran's calm. Myra sensed it even when he tried to hide it. She saw it in the way his shoulders tensed when wind rustled through the pines, in the way his eyes glimmered gold when the fire burned low. One evening she found him outside, standing at the edge of the clearing, bare feet in the grass. Moonlight silvered his hair, casting him in an otherworldly glow. "You're fighting it again," she said softly. He turned slightly. "I don't want to scare you." "You don't. You should." She stepped closer until they stood a breath apart. "I've seen what you are. And I've seen who you are. They're not the same." Kieran closed his eyes, exhaling. "You make it sound simple." "It's not. But it's true." When he opened his eyes again, the gold had faded, leaving only exhaustion and wonder. "How can you still look at me that way after everything?" "Because you're still here," she said. "Because I am too." The air between them trembled. He brushed a strand of hair from her face, his fingers lingering a moment too long. Myra's heart raced, but she didn't step back. The firelight behind them flickered through the window, painting their shadows together on the wall. He dropped his hand slowly. "If I ever lose control again, promise me you'll run." She shook her head. "No. If you fall, I'll find you." A faint smile touched his lips. "You're stubborn. I learned from the best." 2 days later, they were not alone. Kieran was mending the fence when he caught a scent, faint, metallic, wrong. His muscles went rigid. Myra saw it instantly. "What is it?" "Blood. Not mine. Not animal." He motioned for her to stay inside, but she followed anyway, matching his pace as they moved through the trees. The smell grew stronger until they reached a clearing. There, half buried beneath leaves, lay the body of a man wearing the mark of the crescent and thorns. Kieran knelt beside him, eyes narrowing. He's one of Silas's lieutenants. Someone got to him first. Myra's stomach turned. Who would? Before she could finish, a low growl rolled from the darkness. Kieran rose slowly, scanning the shadows. Two yellow eyes stared back. Another wolf stepped into the light, larger than Kieran, its fur streaked with scars. Not human, not entirely beast. It stopped a few feet away, lips curling back to reveal blood-slick fangs. Kieran's voice was a whisper. "Lysander? You know him?" Myra asked. He was Pack. Lysander's growl deepened. "You broke the pact, brother. You killed our master." Kieran's posture shifted, protective, ready. "Silas wasn't our master. He was a chain." "Then you'll die free," Lysander snarled, lunging forward. Kieran met him mid-air. The clash was thunder, fur, claws, teeth, fury. Myra stumbled back, heart pounding, watching flashes of motion too fast for thought. The fight was brutal and short. Both wolves crashed through branches, rolled across the clearing, until one cry split the night. When it ended, Kieran stood over Lysander's fallen form, chest heaving. He looked half wild, eyes burning, jaw clenched in grief and rage. Myra approached cautiously. "Kieran." He turned toward her, and for a moment the beast looked back. His breath came fast, his hands shaking. She reached for him anyway, touching his arm. The contact broke whatever hold the wild had on him. He shuddered once, then fell to his knees, human again. "He was my friend," he whispered. "I know. He wouldn't stop. He was gone before I." She knelt beside him, pulling his head against her shoulder. "Then let him rest. You did what you had to." For a long time they stayed like that, rain beginning to fall again, washing blood into the earth. Above them, the moon slipped behind clouds, and the forest breathed. Back at the cabin, Kieran washed the blood from his hands in silence. Myra tended the fire, glancing toward him every few moments. When he finally looked up, his eyes were tired but clear. "There will be more," he said. "Others like him. Then we'll be ready." He gave a small, almost disbelieving laugh. "You keep saying we. Because it's true." Outside, the wind rose, carrying the scent of rain and pine through the open window. Myra crossed to him, took his hands, and held them until the tension eased. "For now," she said softly, "let us just breathe." Kieran nodded. "For now." And for the first time since the curse had broken, the wolf within him went still. The storm passed sometime before dawn. When Myra woke, pale light filtered through the cabin window, soft as breath. Kieran was gone. For a heartbeat, panic seized her, then she saw his shadow moving near the lake. He stood at the edge of the water, stripped to the waist, washing the blood from his arms. The surface shimmered with dawn's reflection, and every movement of his body was slow, deliberate, haunted. Myra stepped outside. The cold bit at her bare feet, but she didn't stop until she stood beside him. "You didn't sleep," she said. He shook his head, eyes still on the lake. "The dreams were worse. About Lysander. And the others. The ones who'll come next." She hesitated, then reached for his hand. His fingers tightened around hers, not possessive, just needing to anchor himself. "They'll come," she said quietly. "But so will we. Whatever this is, you're not alone anymore." He turned toward her then, studying her face as though he were seeing her for the first time, the courage beneath her softness, the fire that had survived every shadow. "I used to think I'd have to fight everything alone," he murmured. "But when I look at you, it feels like the wild finally has a home." Her throat tightened. "Then let us keep it safe." They buried Lysander that morning beneath the oak ridge. Kieran marked the grave with a stone carved with the sign of the crescent, not as a symbol of the old pack, but as a farewell to it. When they returned to the cabin, Myra found an old chest beneath the floorboards. Inside lay a collection of weathered parchments, some bearing her family's crest, a wolf intertwined with a rose. "Kieran," she called softly. "You should see this." He crouched beside her, lifting one of the scrolls. The ink had faded, but the handwriting was unmistakable, ancient, elegant, filled with strange sigils. "It's a blood pact," he said slowly. "Between your bloodline and mine." She frowned. "What does it say?" He traced a line of text with his finger, lips moving silently before he translated. "When the last of the crescent line meets the rose, the curse will end or begin anew." Myra's heartbeat quickened. "You think that's us?" "I think it always was." She sat back, trying to make sense of it. "Then maybe it wasn't just luck that brought us together." "No," he said. "It was something older. Something that's been waiting." The next few days passed in wary calm. Kieran patrolled the woods each morning while Myra studied the parchments, piecing together the forgotten story of the curse. She learned that centuries ago, the Crescent Pack had been sworn protectors of the Rose family, guardians bound by blood and moonlight. But betrayal had shattered the alliance, twisting loyalty into vengeance. The curse was never meant to create monsters, it was meant to punish disobedience. One evening, as Myra read by firelight, Kieran returned with a distant look in his eyes. "They're moving," he said. "3, maybe 4 left from Silas's loyalists. They're hunting." Her pulse quickened. "Then we can't stay." He nodded. "We head north. The old ruins near Silverfall. The ground there is sacred. If the prophecy means anything, it'll end there." Myra gathered the parchments and a small bundle of supplies. Before they left, she looked around the cabin one last time, the fire's dying glow, the faint scent of cedar and rain. "We'll come back," she whispered. Kieran squeezed her shoulder. "If fate allows." The journey north took 3 days. The forest grew wilder, the air sharper. At night, the wolves howled in distant hills, a chorus of challenge and mourning. Kieran walked ahead, senses alert, while Myra followed, every step heavy with the weight of what awaited them. By the time they reached Silverfall, the sun was a dying ember on the horizon. The ruins rose from the mist like bones, ancient arches overgrown with ivy, a temple carved into the mountain. At its heart stood a circular stone dais etched with the intertwined symbols of crescent and rose. "This is where it began," Kieran said. "And where it ends," Myra whispered. They stepped into the circle together. The air shimmered a low hum, deep and resonant, rising from the stone beneath their feet. The runes began to glow, reacting to their presence. Kieran tensed. Something's waking. Before he could finish, shadows burst from the tree line, the last of Silas's pack, eyes gleaming with hunger and hate. Myra backed toward the center of the dais as Kieran shifted, bones cracking, fur rippling across his skin. The wolf within him answered the call, but this time there was no rage, only purpose. The fight was chaos. Claws tore through dust, growls echoed like thunder. Myra dodged a lunging attacker, snatching a blade from the ground and slashing across its flank. Kieran fought like a storm, unleashed, every movement precise, every strike protective. But for every foe he felled, 2 more came. Then Myra remembered the parchments, the final verse she hadn't yet read aloud. She reached into her satchel, pulling the scroll free, and shouted the words into the wind, by blood of moon and bond of flame, let curse and thou be one the same. The beast shall guard, the rose shall bind, until the stars forget their name. The air ignited. A surge of silver light burst from the circle, swallowing the battlefield. Kieran froze mid-strike, the glow wrapping around him like a living pulse. His eyes widened not in pain, but in recognition. "Myra," he gasped, "you're breaking it?" The light expanded, swallowing the wolves. Their snarls turned to cries, their forms dissolving into dust. When it faded, silence fell. Kieran collapsed to his knees, human once more, chest heaving. Myra ran to him, catching him before he fell. "It's over," she whispered. He looked up at her, disbelief softening into wonder. "You did it?" "No," she said. "We did." For the first time in centuries, the forest was quiet. The moon rose without calling to the beast, the curse was gone. They spent the night in the ruins, watching the stars through the broken roof. Myra leaned against Kieran, feeling his warmth, the steady rhythm of his breathing. There were no more secrets between them, no more chains. "What happens now?" she asked. He smiled faintly. "Now we live. No prophecies. No curses. Just, us." She tilted her head toward him, eyes soft. "That sounds like the first miracle we've had in a long time." Kieran brushed his fingers against her cheek, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "Then let us not waste it." Outside, dawn crept over the mountains. The lake shimmered below, reflecting gold and fire. A new day. A new bond. And for the first time since fate had tangled their paths, the wild within them both finally found peace. The forest was quiet again. It had been only a week since the battle at Silver Fall, yet every sunrise felt like a lifetime reborn. Myra woke to the sound of wind in the pines and the distant call of an eagle. When she turned, Kieran was already awake beside her, eyes on the horizon. "You don't sleep much," she murmured. "I keep expecting to hear howling," he said. "But there's only birds now." She smiled faintly. "That's a good sign." He looked at her then, and for a moment, everything, the war, the loss, the curse, seemed to fall away. "It is," he said. "It means we've finally done it. A home among ruins." They stayed in the Silver Fall ruins through the spring, rebuilding stone by stone. The dais where the curse had broken became a courtyard. Myra planted wildflowers along the edges, and Kieran carved symbols of protection into the stones. Sometimes travelers came, hunters, drifters, people who had fled Silas's pack. They came with fear in their eyes, but when they saw the peace in Kieran's face, the fear faded. Myra welcomed them with food and quiet words. A small community began to form around the ruins, a place not of power, but of refuge. Kieran was wary at first, yet he couldn't deny how right it felt to build instead of destroy. One evening, as they walked along the ridge, Myra watched smoke from their new hearth rise into the darkening sky. "Do you ever miss it?" she asked. "The wildness?" He thought for a long time before answering. "No. It's still there, just quieter. Like a river after the flood." She slipped her hand into his. "Then let us keep it that way." Echoes of the past. Peace never stays untested. Late one night, a messenger arrived, a young woman, barely older than Myra had been when all this began. Her clothes were torn, her eyes bright with desperation. "They're coming," she said. "A band from the eastern clans. They say the curse isn't gone, that it's changed shape." Kieran's expression hardened. "How many?" Maybe 20. They think you stole their birthright. Myra's heart clenched. Another war. Kieran shook his head slowly. No. Not again. He sent word to the settlers to hide in the valley, then turned to Myra. If this isn't over, we face it together. But we end it without blood. That night, under the cold gleam of the half-moon, they stood before the ruins as shadows approached through the trees. The eastern clan looked half-feral, their leader wearing chains of bone. You carry the mark of the crescent, he said. Yet you claim to be free. Prove it. Kieran stepped forward. The moon no longer owns us. You can feel it if you let yourself. The leader snarled. Lies. Then Myra lifted her voice clear, steady. He speaks truth. The curse bound our bloodlines together. But now it binds no one. If you fight, you'll only chain yourselves again. The pack shifted uneasily. Kieran reached out his hand, palm up, a gesture of peace. For a long heartbeat, no one moved. Then one of the younger wolves, a boy with golden eyes, stepped forward and touched Kieran's palm. The air shivered. Nothing happened. No transformation, no pain. Only the stillness of freedom. The leader lowered his weapon. Perhaps, you speak truth. And just like that, centuries of hatred began to crumble. The quiet between. Weeks passed without conflict. The clans scattered or stayed, helping build homes along the valley. Myra tended the gardens and taught the children the old songs of peace. Kieran helped raise walls and hunted only when needed. One evening, after the day's work, they sat beside the lake. Fireflies danced over the water. Kieran's arm rested lightly around her shoulders. Do you ever think, he said softly, about the day we met when you walked into that alley and found me? She laughed, the sound low and full of memory. I thought you were trouble. I was. But you were my kind of trouble. He chuckled, and the sound melted something inside her. There was still grief between them, names they didn't speak, faces lost, but now it was softened by time and the steady rhythm of rebuilding. Myra leaned her head against his shoulder. I never thought peace could feel so strange. He brushed his thumb along her wrist. It'll start to feel normal soon. I promise. The call of Silverfall. By midsummer, word of Silverfall had spread beyond the valley. Travelers came seeking healing or answers, calling Kieran the last Alpha and Myra the Rose of Dawn. Titles neither of them wanted, but both bore with quiet grace. One afternoon, a council of nearby villages arrived. They asked Kieran to lead them to restore the packs under a new banner. He listened, then shook his head. I'm done ruling by fear, he said. If we build anything new, it will be ruled by choice. That night, as they watched the stars rise, Myra asked, do you regret saying no? Kieran smiled. Not at all. I'd rather be here with you than on any throne. Her heart stirred at the simplicity of it. For so long, everything had been war and blood and prophecy. Now it was just a man and a woman learning how to live without either. The rising dawn. When autumn came, the valley turned gold. The settlers held a festival in honor of the peace, the first in living memory. Lanterns floated over the lake like drifting stars. Music carried through the air, laughter mingled with the scent of firewood and rain. Myra stood at the edge of the water, watching children chase their reflections. Kieran approached from behind, wrapping his arms around her waist. This, he whispered, is what I wanted to protect. She turned in his arms, eyes bright with unshed tears. You did. No, he said, voice warm against her ear. We did. The crowd began to sing a melody older than memory, one that spoke of new beginnings. Myra rested her head against his chest and let the music carry them. Around them, the valley shimmered in silver and gold. As the lanterns rose, one by one, she whispered, "What should we call it, this new place?" Kieran thought for a moment. "Dawn Reach," he said. "Because we finally reached it?" She smiled. "Dawn Reach. I like that." He brushed a kiss against her temple, tender and unhurried. "Then that's what it is." 6 Epilogue, The Wild and the Rest. Years later, stories would tell of the Alpha who gave up his crown and the woman who turned a curse into peace. Children would grow in the valley, never knowing the sound of war. At night, when the moon rose high, its light touched Silverfall, but it no longer pulled at blood or bone. It simply shone. Myra sometimes still woke before dawn, stepping outside to watch the mist curl over the lake. Kieran would join her, his hand finding hers without a word. They stood together, two survivors who had learned that love could be quiet and fierce all at once. Still listening for howls, she tease. He'd smile, eyes warm. "Just yours." And somewhere deep in the forest, a single wolf would answer, a free creature singing to the rising dawn. The years passed like ripples across still water, quiet, unhurried, and full of light. Silverfall had grown into a sanctuary. Its broken stones were now gardens and homes, its wild paths filled with laughter. The curse that once bled through the roots of the valley was now only a story whispered to children beside the fire. But for Myra and Kieran, the legend was not just a tale. It was memory, heartbeat, and promise. The Night of Lanterns. It was the night of the harvest moon, the festival that marked a year since peace had come to Dawn Reach. The air shimmered with gold, hundreds of lanterns floated above the lake, their reflections doubling the stars. Music drifted through the village square, soft strings, drums like distant thunder. Myra stood at the water's edge in a dress the color of twilight. The breeze lifted her hair, carrying the scent of pine and smoke. Behind her, footsteps approached, steady, familiar. "You always find the quietest corner," Kieran said, his voice a low rumble that still sent warmth through her chest. "I like watching," she replied. "It reminds me how far we've come." He smiled, the kind of smile that reached his eyes. "Do you ever miss the old world?" She turned toward him, her gaze soft. "I miss who we were when we fought for it. But not the world itself." Kieran stepped closer. The lantern light caught in his hair, turning the strands to gold. "Then maybe it's time to stop looking back." She lifted her hand, tracing the faint scar that still marked his jaw, a reminder of battles won and survived. "And start looking forward." He nodded. Together. Their foreheads touched, breath mingling. Around them, the night hummed a chorus of life, peace, and promise. The music swelled, and the villagers' laughter echoed across the lake, but for Myra and Kieran, the world had narrowed to that single heartbeat of closeness. The bond renewed. Later, when the festival slowed and the lanterns drifted toward the mountains, they walked through the forest path that led to the ridge above Silverfall. The moon hung low and full, painting the trees in silver. The ruins below glowed faintly with moss and moonlight. "This place still remembers us," Myra whispered. Kieran glanced down at the ancient stones. "It should. It's where we stopped being haunted." She smiled. "And where we started living." He caught her hand, fingers intertwining. "You know," he said softly, "when I was cursed, I thought the wolf would be the end of me. But it wasn't he the beast that terrified me most. What was it? Losing myself to something I couldn't control. He paused, his thumb brushing against her knuckles. Then you came, and somehow you saw the man when I couldn't. Her heart swelled, aching, and full. I didn't just see him, Kieran. I believed in him. He looked at her then, eyes shining with something deeper than words. The forest seemed to still around them, as though even the night listened. Then believe this too, he whispered, I'm never letting you go. The wind rose, cool and gentle. Myra stepped into him, resting her head against his chest. She could hear the steady rhythm beneath his ribs, the sound of a man once cursed, now entirely, gloriously human. A love beyond legends. Days turned into seasons. The valley changed, children were born, trees grew taller, new stories began, but Myra and Kieran remained its heart. People often saw them walking hand in hand through the meadows at dusk, their silhouettes outlined in gold. They spoke little, but when they looked at each other, the silence felt like poetry. Sometimes, at night, Kieran still wandered the forest. Not out of fear, but peace. The moonlight no longer called him to battle, it only reminded him of the wild that had once lived inside him and how love had tamed it without chains. Myra would find him there, barefoot in the grass, the silver glow soft against his skin. He'd turn, smile, and she'd laugh quietly. Still can't sleep? Still listening for you, he'd reply. And she would walk into his arms, the two of them framed by the endless sky. It wasn't a story of grand thrones or fiery prophecies anymore. It was simply the story of two souls who had defied fate and found peace where war had once reigned. The final dawn. On the morning of the 10th year after the curse broke, Myra woke before the sun. She slipped outside, wrapping a shawl around her shoulders. The air was crisp, the valley blanketed in mist. She could hear the faint rush of the river and the gentle stir of wind through the pines. Kieran joined her moments later, barefoot, hair tousled from sleep. He stood beside her, silent for a while, then asked softly, "Do you ever wonder what we'd be if fate hadn't pushed us together?" Myra smiled without looking away from the horizon. "I think we'd still have found each other. Maybe not like this. Maybe in another life. But somehow." He slipped his arm around her waist. "Then I'd find you in every one." The sun crested the ridge, then gold spilling across the valley, burning away the mist. It touched the ruins, the lake, the gardens, and finally them. Myra turned into his embrace, eyes gleaming in the new light. "This," she whispered, "feels like the beginning again." Kieran pressed a kiss to her forehead. "That's because it always will be." And as dawn broke fully over Silver Fall, they stood together, wrapped in sunlight and quiet joy. The last echoes of the old world faded into memory, leaving only the promise of the life they had built, wild, human, and beautifully free. Epilogue, the Song of the Crescent and the Rose. Long after they were gone, the valley still told their story. Travelers spoke of two lovers who had ended a curse, who had built peace from ruin. Some said their spirits still walked the lake's edge at night, hand in hand beneath the full moon, the air filled with the scent of pine and wildflowers. And when the children of Dawn Reach asked who they were, the elders smiled and answered, they were the Crescent and the Rose. Not monsters. Not myths. Just love braver than fate, and stronger than fear. And somewhere, if one listened closely enough, the forest would sigh with the sound of a heartbeat, steady, enduring,